Well, the red dust had hardly settled on BHP and Rio's forced retreat from their Pilbara joint venture when Rio popped up with its standalone plan for a massive boost in its export capacity and efficiency to China. The $3 billion spend at the Cape Lambert port facility is on top of another $3 billion worth of related projects announced in July, and is intended to increase Rio's iron exports by 50% in the next 5 years. It's a further sign that the wounds of 2 years ago, when Rio shares were less than a third of their current price, have healed. I spoke to Rio chief Tom Albanese, who's got plenty on his plate right now with some rather tricky situations in places like Guinea and Mongolia, and the sudden re-emergence of the mining resources rent tax and the state royalties as a political issue. Tom Albanese, you must understand that the federal government can't just write a blank cheque that allows the states to increase royalties whenever they like, knowing that the federal government will compensate mining companies, which will mean a sort of a backdoor flow of money from the Commonwealth to the states. I mean, you must see the federal government's point of view on that.
I just want to say that in July, when we made the agreement on the MORT, that allowed us to begin making quite significant investments. And they've been punctuated again by today, by just this week, with the $3 billion, more than $3 billion of commitments and approvals to get Cape Lambert going to its next stage of advancement. Now, at the time, we recognized that there would be a transition committee set up, and Martin Ferguson and Don Argus, I have the utmost confidence that they will work through this. And there's a whole range of other issues. There'll be details that need to be worked through, but they'll be in the spirit of the agreement that had been signed off in July. And again, that has allowed us to make more than $6 billion of investments just in iron ore in Australia since July, and nearly $7 billion if you include the work we've signed off in terms of taking Argyle to the underground. So these are very, very important projects. And again, just to emphasize the importance of the iron ore expansions this week, it's taken us about 40 years, more than 40 years, to build the Pilbara up to 220 million tons per year. With these investments that we've announced this week, we're on the pathway to increase our businesses in the Pilbara by more than 50% just in the next 5 years. That's massive change, massive projects.
So you're saying that if you hadn't done that deal in July, you would not have announced these expansions that you've just announced, and that if they change the deal, you'll cancel the expansions?
Again, the spirit of the discussions in July put us back on the path of investing in Australia, and that's quite important. And again, I think from my own perspective, I am quite confident that the government, that the transition committee will work through this and a number of other points that will come along the way for final implementation.
Well, I take it, in fact, that you wouldn't have announced the expansions if you hadn't done that deal in July.
We are going ahead with these projects, and we will leave the implementation to the transition committee. Martin Ferguson, I have absolute confidence he's going to do a good job on this. Don Argus is there. The government of Australia recognizes the importance of these projects for Australia. So again, we are moving forward. We're moving forward in a spirit of constructive development for Rio Tinto in Australia and in the Pilbara.
Are you prepared to compromise?
I just see continued engagement, which we are prepared to do with the transition committee, is the right outcome.
Okay. Well, look, the expansions you've announced this week come just after the collapse of the merger with BHP, the iron ore operations, because of antitrust problems. So it looks like a plan B, but is it fair to say that it's actually a better plan than plan A, that you prefer plan B to plan A?
Well, I think the single best thing that we could be doing for Rio Tinto shareholders is to get as many tons developed in the Pilbara, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, we've been saying all during the course of this year that it was our intention to expand Cape Lambert. And we talked about expanding at 280 million tons, then on to 330 million tons. And that had been part of our planning, and we had said we would anticipate that coming into the fourth quarter. We're now in the fourth quarter. We've looked at that. We've seen all the plans by Sam and Sam's team. The board approved it, and that's what we announced yesterday. So again, we sometimes use, as mining engineers, we use jargon like 283 or 330 million tons per year. It's an easy number to roll off your tongue, but let's just think about the scale of these projects. Just what we're doing at Cape Lambert, the footprint of that project is probably the size, if not bigger, than Sydney Airport. So this is a massive undertaking. This is quite a bit of civil work, quite a bit of fabrication work, quite a bit of construction work, and we're going to accelerate that in this period of time. Rio Tinto has a great track record, I think the best track record of building these large projects in the Pilbara on time and on budget, and that's what we intend to do here.
Is it fair to say that whereas you've got a lot of flexibility at Cape Lambert, you can expand it as you're doing, that BHP is far more constricted at Port Hedland and really can't expand in the same way?
Well, I think you probably should ask them that question. Certainly from our perspective, I've always seen Cape Lambert as being probably the best pathway for expansions in the Pilbara. And again, that makes the most sense for us to get that going as quickly as we can.
Yeah, but I'm wondering whether at the heart of the merger proposal with BHP was actually giving BHP access to Cape Lambert.
The production joint venture that we had agreed upon last year was for the creation of synergies. Both we and BHP worked very closely together, and we did everything we could to get those regulatory approvals. But at the end of the day, I think once we heard from the regulators, we both recognized this is just getting too hard. So we, unfortunately, because I'm disappointed, but we terminated that agreement this week, and we're moving on. We're moving on by expanding our operations in the Pilbara.
You were arguing in favour of the merger right up until the end, until it collapsed. Now, since then, there's been a bit of talk about you personally, that for you, it's been 3 strikes. There was the Alcan deal, which was disastrous, the Chinalco deal, which was bad, and now the merger, which has also collapsed. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I think we have a very strong business. Let's just remember that we had record profits in the first half. Let's also remember that we had cash generation from our operations of nearly $10 billion in the first half. All of our businesses are running very well. We recognize that we should be doing everything we possibly can to get this iron ore joint venture done. Try it out with the regulators, and again, this has been a very collective, aligned effort between Rio Tinto and BHP, between Marius and I, between the respective teams. We've worked very hard together, but again, we said from the beginning that we would respect the regulators and the regulatory process, and that's exactly what we've done.
So you're confident you still have shareholder support?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the expansion in the Pilbara, does that mean you're less likely to go ahead with the big Simandou iron ore project in Guinea, in Africa? Right
now, I'm focusing on all the work we're doing within Australia. But again, and we should recognize that more than 80%, maybe 85% of our assets are in OECD countries, and it's probably the greatest OECD coverage of all the major mining peers. But we have a global footprint. Our strategy is to look at the best first-tier, large, long-life operations on a global basis, and that's where operations like Simandou would be. That's where the copper project we're building now in Mongolia would be. These are first-tier assets on a global basis, but they're in the context of 85% of our assets being in OECD countries. We will take the time to develop these mines, develop them carefully, because I think they can be a very important part of our next generation of mines. And I would like to get Simandou first production in that next 5 years. And again, we're working on the ground to do just that.
But is the behaviour of the Guinea government making it more and more difficult to get it up?
Again, we have to respect our engagements with governments the world over. And we have to also respect the fact that Guinea's going up against its runoff elections here in the next few weeks. And again, all we want to do is we want to work toward that, continue to engage with the transitional government, and then when the elected government's in place, engage with the elected government.
Just on the Mongolian copper and gold project, you're making life very difficult for Ivanhoe, your partner there. They're trying to raise some money and you're making life very difficult. Are you just trying to get more of the project by putting the squeeze on them?
First, what we are doing is working together and collectively with Ivanhoe to build I think one of the best copper mines the world will see in the next few years in a short period of time to Rio Tinto standards. I'm very pleased with the collective work effort between Rio Tinto and Ivanhoe to do just that. It's very important for Rio Tinto. It's very important for Ivanhoe. It's also very important for Mongolia. It's a first-class mine being built on time, and I'd like to see it actually get sped up if we can. So first production by 2013. It is on track as we speak. So we're building the mine today. Now, of course, we'll always have commercial tensions because we have our shareholder interest, Ivanhoe has their shareholder interest, and that leads to those natural tensions. But both companies recognize, and certainly I am committed to focus first and foremost on building the Oyu Tolgoi project to Rio Tinto standards, and again, do it as quickly as we possibly can.
Well, actually, I don't think there are always these sort of tensions. I mean, this is significantly short of harmonious between you and Ivanhoe.
Oh, I think that every time that companies get through critical stages, they are basically, there will be tensions and companies will be asserting rights, and that's exactly what's going on. But emphasize the focus is and needs to be on the project and project delivery. There's
a lot of focus on the Chinese economy at the moment. There was some data on it this week. How do you see things there?
We've seen a very strong development and pattern of economic growth in China over the past year. Truly a V-shaped recovery coming out of the global financial crisis, and to some extent maybe getting a bit overheated in certain aspects of the economy. So for the past 6 months, there has been a gradual tightening in various areas. Recently, there have been signs of inflation. You've seen interest rates rising. Third quarter GDP numbers are out now. I do think that, again, what China's trying to do is to find almost that Goldilocks point where the economy is not too hot or not too cold. And I think from our perspective, some tightening but not too much tightening, keeping the GDP above what they've targeted at 8% is probably running above 9% now, would be probably the best situation for continued growth of that Chinese economy and our Chinese markets, not just in 2010 and 2011, but out there in 2013, 14, and 15.
Do you have any concerns that if they don't allow their currency to rise more than they are, that they'll end up with an unsustainable bubble there in China?
I think currency discussions are certainly going to be a matter of the G20. From my own perspective, I think it's something that should get worked out, and I would hope to see that gets worked out.
Thanks very much for joining us, Tom Albanese.
Okay, good to talk to you.